Hey everyone, I hope you're all good today. Special thanks to everyone who is here right on time for the kickoff. We always appreciate that. But before we dive into the content, we're just going to give a couple more minutes for people to join the session here live. And while we're waiting, I'll just quickly introduce the speakers that we've got for the webinar today. So we've got quite an international panel today, a lot of different time zones going on. So first of all, we've got Abraham, paid media manager at DeVry University. How are things with you, Abraham?
Hey everyone, doing good. Yeah, happy to be here. Yep.
And where is it that you're calling in from today?
Yes, I'm calling in from our home office in Chicago.
Nice. Are you there often in Chicago, or is it
No,
occasional?
I actually I live in Tampa, Florida, so it's a little bit of a change, but I'm here for a week.
And you were saying just before we joined that the snow is pretty intense in Chicago right now.
Yeah. Where I come from, I mean, it's normally around 70, 60 degrees, sunny, and then when I landed in Chicago, it's just gray and white and snow everywhere, so getting used to it.
Yeah. We're not built for that in the UK. Everything was shut down immediately. We've also got on the other side of the world, Jasmine, customer success manager at Lunio. How are you doing today, Jasmine?
Yeah, I'm good. This evening, shall we say?
Yes. Yeah. Very late where you are, to be fair. So I appreciate you extra, for taking the time to join today. Yeah.
No worries.
I know you were. Has Australia Day happened, or I know you were planning to celebrate that when you're out there?
Yeah, no, that's tomorrow. So yeah, that's why in a cabin at the moment, because we are going to go do some exciting things for that.
Nice. And I bet you can't wait to get back to the lovely weather in Manchester that we're having.
Honestly, I miss it so much. Cold. Give me that any day of the week. Yeah.
It feels like home when it's raining constantly and windy. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what to do with the sunshine here. I'm struggling.
Yeah. Well, I would struggle. Like I would need the factor 50 sunscreen on everywhere. But yeah. We've had a few more people join. So we'll get going. Again, welcome everyone. Very glad to have you here, either live or watching back on demand. For those that don't know, I'm James. I'm the content manager here at Lunio. I'll be hosting the webinar today, asking questions, presenting some of the content, and attempting to keep us on track for time. So we're aiming for around 50 minutes to get through the content today, with some time left at the end for Q&A, which I'll say more about in a second. We have got a lot to cover, but we should be able to get through it all. So just a few other very quick bits of housekeeping before we get into the agenda and the content that we'll be covering today. We are recording this session and it will be available to watch back on demand. So we'll also be creating a written webinar recap and posting that on the Lunio blog. And I'll email you with the link to that when it's live as well. As I was saying about the Q&A, if you have any questions for Abraham, please pop those into the Q&A tab, which you can see here in Goldcast, just so they don't get lost in the main chat. And we'll try and get around to as many of those as we can at the end of the session. We'll also have our team here at Lunio behind the scenes responding to some of those questions via the chat as well. Also, I just wanted to flag in the intro here that we've got some resources in the Docs tab in Goldcast, and I'll be directing your attention there at relevant parts of the session today, so you can get more context and information on some of the strategies we'll be covering throughout. In that Docs section, you can also find the Lunio case study that we've created in partnership with Abraham and the rest of the paid media team at DeVry. So be sure to check that out. It kind of gives you full context on the performance improvements that DeVry saw in 2023 by blocking fake clicks and invalid traffic. We'll also be running a few audience polls during the session, which you can vote for in the polls tab. So please do give us your response there. You should see a notification pop up whenever a new poll is open for responses, and you can respond to that by clicking on the polls tab. So just on that note, we will bring our first poll up on screen here. I'm just going to open that. and bring it up on screen. So the first poll question, have you enabled Google Consent Mode version 2 yet? So this is quite a hot topic in paid media at the moment, especially in the UK and the EU. It will be interesting to see, how many people have got ahead of the curve and are prepped, ready ahead of the March deadline. I know, Abraham, you're kind of very US based and you advertise to US audience. So Consent Mode version 2, not really on your radar as of yet.
Yeah, not quite.
But yeah, as we can see here from the results of the poll, most people haven't got it yet. Some people it's not applicable for, and there's some kind of very early prepped individuals who are ready to go when these changes come in March. So yeah, actually, just on that note, we actually just published a blog on the Lunio website about Google Consent Mode version 2. So if you're one of those people who haven't got it enabled yet and you want a bit more information on what to do and the kinds of things you need to pay attention to with Consent Mode version 2, how it operates, you can head to the Lunio site, check out our latest blog, and there's more information on it there. But for now, I'll just close down that poll. And that's all the housekeeping out of the way. So I'm just going to bring up the agenda here. So we've got 6 main points to cover today. Firstly, we'll be looking at budget planning and how to double down on what works. Next, we'll talk about landing page and conversion rate optimization. Then we'll cover enhancing your exclusion targeting criteria. And that section features one of my favorite LinkedIn posts that I saw in 2023, just in terms of the value that it provides in terms of preventing wasted ad spend. So you'll definitely want to stick around for that tip. It could literally save you thousands in ad spend this year. After exclusion targeting, we'll discuss eliminating wasted spend on invalid traffic and how DeVry drove success with Lunio in 2023. Then we'll move on to an effective strategy to reduce your advertising costs on LinkedIn. It's one that we've been experimenting with at Lunio, and we've seen great results from it, effectively cutting our CPC in half for certain campaigns. But we'll go into more detail on that during that section of the webinar. And lastly, we'll be wrapping up with Abraham's thoughts on some key Google Ads trends for 2024. So that's it for the agenda. We'll just move on to the main topic for today. So as you might expect, the starting point for making your 2024 budget work harder is diving into your historical performance data. The more accurate and the cleaner that data is, the more effective you'll be here. But even if your past performance data isn't perfect and there are some holes in it, you can still get a lot of valuable insight from it by interrogating it as closely as you can. You essentially want to work out where your budget has previously delivered, where it hasn't, and going ahead without a clear grasp on that is like swimming in the dark. So specifically, you want to dive into channel and campaign level data on metrics such as profitability, revenue, average order value, cost per lead, and cost per sale. And once you've got a handle on those metrics, then you need to ask the question, okay, what does paid media specifically need to succeed in 2024? Is that a specific number of new customers? Is that a profit margin? Is it a revenue number? Is it a certain cost per lead or a certain cost per sale? You should kind of know those North Star metrics in terms of the goals that you're working towards that will allow you to achieve success in 2024 with your budget. So with that said, I'll pass over to you, Abraham. Just if anyone is working with a reduced or flat budget in 2024, what advice would you give them to help ensure that they are focusing on the right channels and the right activities?
Yeah, I would say like in general, you're going to want to cut out the bottom 20% and focus on the top 20%. You're going to have to spend on the campaigns and channels that really drive sales for your business. And if it's not, you're going to have to cut that out if your budget's reduced. But to ultimately understand that, you have to have really strong trafficking and tracking capabilities to understand what channels do drive sales or what campaigns do drive sales, right? And even to bring it back to Lunio gives a lot of great insights and visibility on what that bottom 20% is and helps you automatically negate it and cut it out, right? So ultimately, year over year, if you're able to cut out that bottom 20%, your campaigns should naturally drive more revenue, and you should see increased budgets at some point.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. But kind of the follow-on point from that, I'm just going to bring this quote on screen here. This is a quote from a previous Lunio webinar. It's highlighting the dangers of cutting spend on harder to attribute activity because it might not look like it's performing as well at first glance. So this is a quote from Gareth Westhead, who is the head of paid media at Clicker here in the UK. And he said, if you stop investing in brand activity on social and SEO, you can obviously save money in the short term, but you'll likely see a dip in performance 3 to 6 months down the line. And in certain circumstances, I've seen those kind of cutbacks do irreparable damage to revenue growth. So Abraham, could you tell us from your perspective, how does brand activity drive revenue, and what should other marketers be thinking about when they budget for that kind of harder to attribute activity?
Yeah, no, brand is really important, but ultimately, if you can't be able to show the value of brand, you're never going to get buy-in to invest in those upper funnel strategies. So number one is just identifying the right KPIs to measure and understanding the longer sales cycle. When someone's searching, just discovering a brand, they're really at the top of the funnel. Whereas if you're on Google just looking for a product or service, you're really just trying to find a fit for what you need then, right? So it's like comparing apples and oranges. You can't compare your brand campaigns to your non-brand campaigns. So I think, to bring this back to really just tracking and analytics, it's important to measure your brand campaigns and show the long-term revenue benefit from those campaigns to get that larger buy-in from your stakeholders.
Yeah, it definitely can be trickier, but yeah, it's definitely worth the investment, and it does take a bit more upfront work. So next, once you've kind of got your priority channels, where your budget has delivered in the past, and you determine the goal metrics that you're working towards, you probably want to estimate, okay, what's possible with your 2024 budget. So each channel generally has its own performance forecasting tool to help you gauge a rough estimate of what you might get in return for a specific budget. Obviously, taking this with a pinch of salt, this is not gospel. But in the interest of time, we're going to focus on Google Performance Planner here. And it uses a slider to show you what's possible within your current campaigns, given a certain level of spend. And then you can then compare that with your previous year's spend. But in summary, as you can clearly see on the graph here, beyond a certain point, additional spending does not yield significant improvements in the campaign's performance. And after a certain point, it will actually start to result in a decrease in ROI. So with that in mind, Abraham, how do you personally navigate this law of diminishing returns in paid media and strike that balance between campaign effectiveness and campaign efficiency?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, and in lead generation, every campaign, product, service does have that ceiling that you hit. And as a PPC manager, you have to understand how far you can push until you're no longer breaking even. So your business, in some instance might be willing to pay higher cost per leads if it's a really lucrative product or service downstream. However, once you do hit that ceiling, there's really no use in continuing to spend. So whether you need to focus on expanding in other markets or maybe expanding in other channels, it's kind of like if you keep putting money into a campaign that initially you're just going to see higher CPCs, higher CPLs, and then higher cost pers down the line, you have to find other areas to invest in. Definitely. Yeah.
So Abraham, like when you mentioned that ceiling, that's a great point. Like, what are the kind of is there any early warning signs that you look out for that flag to you that you're approaching that ceiling, and it might be start the time to diversify?
It's always going to start on the CPCs or CPMs or your frontline metrics. So if you start to see cost per impressions, cost per clicks really rise, it's going to be your first flag that, hey, the market is highly competitive and there's not as many searches or impressions that I can truly compete for. And then that'll have a natural downstream effect, right? As CPCs go up, you're going to see cost per lead go up, and then all those other metrics down the line.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have spoke about investing money in channels and campaigns where there is more predictability in terms of the outcomes you'll achieve through your historic performance. But that being said, it is also important to set aside a certain portion of your 2024 budget for testing new approaches where obviously it's going to be harder to predict your outcomes in the same way that you can do from your previous top performing campaigns and channels. And this testing needs to be factored in from the outset to your 2024 budget. So Abraham, could you outline the importance of setting aside that budget for testing and also give us an idea of the kinds of things you experimented with at DeVry in 2023?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think new technology is coming out all the time. And so you can't rely on old media products because at some point they either get deprecated or no longer effective. So you kind of always have to be innovating with any sort of paid media campaigns. In general, I think, any budget is better than no budget when it comes to testing. So if you can throw 3% at testing a new product or a new beta, then that's worth it, right? Ideally, you want to have at least around 10, maybe 15% in terms of testing annually, but not every brand has that luxury. I think, at DeVry, we've tested a few things, right? We've tested obviously broad match. That's been a big innovator that's come through in the last year. I mean, it's been around for a while, but Google's really put a lot of emphasis on making it a core piece of their Google Ads product. But yeah, every business is going to be a little bit different. I know PMax is out there. There's some interesting discovery campaigns within Google. And then, Meta, and then you can even test new channels like even the rise of TikTok, right? Their ad server network is not by any means as sophisticated as Google, but their demographics are different, their audiences are different and unique. So that's definitely an area I'd recommend testing as well, right? But not for everyone. You have to make sure that you do have a strong case, a strong testing parameters, so you're not just throwing money endlessly until you hopefully get lightning in a bottle.
Is TikTok something that you've kind of experimented with at DeVry?
No, I haven't, but I have some colleagues that have in the past and seen varying success with it.
And I know obviously a lot of e-commerce brands, a lot of retail brands are seeing great performance with Performance Max. I know your experience, Abraham, has been slightly different. It's not performing as well on the lead gen side. So could you kind of give us your summary of your test with PMax so far?
Yeah, I don't think PMax is right for everyone, right? To your point, I've seen really great success stories on the e-commerce side. On service-based businesses, it's a little different, right? It's still a work in progress and by no means is as effective as a lead generation tool as, exact match, phrase match, even some of the lead gen meta campaigns. Yeah, it still has some runway to go for it to be like really a full service product in the way Google wants it to be.
Yeah. A lot more developments there coming, no doubt. So before we move on and talk about landing page optimization in more detail, I just wanted to share this meme first of all, which I think captures the situation pretty well. It's very easy to end up putting the majority of your time and attention into the Google Ads side of things and forget about the other parts of the process, which are just as important. Google Ads, as we know, will always try and take the credit for those conversions, but your landing pages are doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that process. So first of all, Abraham, kind of top level, what are the key priorities that come to your mind when you think about landing page optimization?
Yeah, so I think user behavior is changing all the time, right? So if you have the same landing page last year as you did this year, like it might still be load quickly and have like a form that works, right? But the user type that's coming to your site is different. So if you just look at it through that perspective, you have to keep updating your site just to meet what users are expecting, or they'll find other sites that are better. So whether that's new forms, more of a mobile experience, right? I think we all know at a high level the trends, but it's important to continually revisit your landing page and don't just ever think it's like a set it and forget it type situation.
Yeah, 100%. And when we spoke before, that was the point that kind of, I didn't think about it that way, but it is like, it's the change in user behavior that drives the development in landing pages. And people, as generations change, as different age groups interact with the internet, their preferences change, and that means landing pages need to change and update. I know you made an interesting point about was it Gen Z preferring mobile experiences over desktop?
I think what I originally said was, I mean, as you see Gen Z enter the workforce, they were born in the era of the iPhone. So they're much more attuned to using a mobile experience opposed to millennial generation, which grew up with the computer, so they want a desktop experience. So as you see more Gen Zs enter the workforce, or even just using search engines, going on Facebook more, TikTok, they go to your website, they definitely want more of a mobile experience. And you see that's where the trend is going, right? Even Google's really talked about the importance of mobile speed in their SEO rankings. So
really interesting stuff. So next, I'm just going to briefly present the data that's on screen here. So this table is essentially showing the different outcomes achieved when a 10K budget is split between PPC spend and conversion rate in various different ways. So the ideal outcome, which is highlighted in the row in bold there, shows that conversion rate, new customers, and CPA are all optimized when there is a 70-30 split between PPC spend and conversion rate optimization. So when you then go on to the bottom row, where you see the increase on CRO with a 60-40 split, conversion rate does increase, but new customers decrease and CPA goes up. And essentially, this is hitting that law of diminishing returns for conversion rate optimization, where further investment, may push up your conversion rate, but actually cause a dip in ROI. So the next slide is very quickly just kind of summarizing the key takeaway from the previous table with data from Unbounce. You should aim to devote 25 to 30% of your paid media budget to landing page optimization and CRO. Definitely don't get caught up in the trap of spending too much time, attention, and budget on Google Ads while underinvesting in your landing pages. Of course, Google Ads is important, but it isn't the whole picture. And not spending enough on CRO essentially causes you to waste a significant portion of your budget through inefficiency. So when thinking about landing page and conversion rate optimization, A/B testing is probably the most important element here, or the one that certainly springs to mind. So Abraham, could you talk us through the A/B testing methodology that you use at DeVry?
Yeah. So I definitely want to preface, I'm not a CRO expert, but obviously it is really important to do a lot of testing on landing page relevancy and really contextually, is this landing page what the user expects? So at a high level, we can do A/B testing on just two similar landing pages that have similar content and finding, okay, what is going to drive a better conversion rate? What's speaking more to this specific audience? And is it essentially driving the results I'm looking for, right? And then to get a little bit more technical, we're all aware of the crazy eggs, VWO. There's a lot of interesting technology out there that gives you the ability to see not only what landing page is working, but why it's working opposed to another one, right? Maybe it's where the form is versus there's an engaging video above the hero image, things like that. And so again, landing page A/B testing is really, really impactful. Not everyone has the resources to do it, but to James, your slide before this, if you do invest in landing page A/B testing and conversion rate optimization, you always see that downstream impact on your cost per lead and your overall ROI.
Do you have you mentioned a couple of tools there. Do you have a personal favorite heat map tool?
Yeah, I think I've used MouseFlow in the past, and it's been really useful. And then I like Crazy Egg too. I just like the UI, but I mean, ultimately they're all really similar. So figure out, from a pricing or product standpoint, what works for you, right? If you have a handful of landing pages and that works, or if you need something that can measure your entire website. So it's going to be different for everyone, but I think it's just based on my past experiences, I've liked Crazy Egg and MouseFlow.
Yeah. And then, the other element of landing pages is obviously I come from a copywriting background, and spending the time and energy required to A/B test a copy, especially above the fold, trying to speak to a very specific group of people and kind of avoid these vague blanket statements. Yeah. That's it. It is an area where, if you spend that time to figure out what resonates the best. Yes, it does take extra effort and extra time and extra budget initially, but that tends to pay off, as you said, Abraham, downstream when your conversion rate is increased off the back of that. So moving on from talking about landing pages and conversion rate optimization, we're going to touch on exclusion targeting here. So as promised, and as I mentioned in the introduction, this is one of my favorite LinkedIn posts from 2023 relating to maximizing budget efficiency. Some of you, if you're based in the UK, may know Thomas already. He's quite prolific on LinkedIn. If you aren't already following him, I recommend doing so. And in this post, he's specifically talking about geographic exclusions via the process outlined. So as he says, open up your locations in Google Ads, filter by city, sort by spend, check any cities that have zero conversions with high spend or high CPA, exclude those and monitor. That is a great tip. And as Thomas has said, it saved many of his clients thousands in ad spend. So if that's something that you're not already doing, definitely worth checking that out. But that being said, your exclusion targeting shouldn't stop there, kind of geographic and city exclusions. The more thought and effort you can put into your audience exclusion criteria, ultimately the less ad spend you'll waste. And that includes the different audiences listed here on the right-hand side of this slide. We actually created a blog at Lunio on this subject, talking about audience exclusions specifically for Google Ads and Meta. You can find that blog post in the Docs tab if you're interested, and it kind of goes into a lot more detail about how you might want to go about excluding certain of those audiences listed on the slide there. And we will get into excluding fake users and fraudulent IP addresses in more detail with Jasmine in just a minute. But also, while we're on the topic of exclusions, I also wanted to direct your attention towards the Lunio's 100K exclusion list for Google display campaigns, with thousands of low-quality websites, irrelevant YouTube channels, junk mobile app placements that simply aren't worth spending your money on. So if you are running Google display campaigns and you haven't got Lunio's 100K exclusion list, go to the Docs tab now, download that, and save yourself some money this year. Lastly, just another resource that I wanted to direct people towards while we're here. If you are looking for a useful free tool to help with the exclusion of fraudulent IP addresses, you'll want to check out abuseipdb.com. It crowdsources IP addresses that have been associated with malicious activity online, and it provides a central blacklist to cross-reference against. Again, the link to abuseipdb is in the docs section. So with that being said, I will pass over to you now, Jasmine, to talk us through the exclusion of fake traffic and also the success that DeVry have had with Lunio in 2023.
Amazing. Thank you, James. Okay, so before we talk about excluding invalid traffic, I think it would be a really good idea for us to take a look at some of the signs that marketers should really be mindful of when they're looking at their analytics. So on the screen right now, we've got a couple of examples in the slide here. Abraham, before you were using Lunio and a sort of invalid traffic blocker, what signs did you see? Were you affected by any of these?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for anyone just looking at Google Analytics, if you see a high bounce rate, low time on site, and a spike in users, that's generally a sign that, whether it's fraudulent or invalid or bots, it's traffic you don't want to your site.
Perfect. 100%. Amazing. Okay, so here we can see the Rise actual Lunio dashboard. This is showing their invalid traffic from October 2022 to October 2023. Now, as we can see in the first couple of months, we've got quite a high percentage of invalid traffic, and then that rapidly drops down. And that's as Lunio is working to get rid of that invalid traffic. So, Abraham, can you talk us through the experience that you had of implementing Lunio, and were you surprised by any of the data that you found?
Yeah, I think to touch on the first piece, there's really just not enough time in the day to manage your accounts. And so I was really surprised with how easy Lunio was to integrate. And I was also surprised with how much invalid traffic we were serving on, right? So we saw an immediate impact because Lunio's ability to automate the process of finding those IPs and showing us what's happening, but then also excluding them to our campaigns and then optimizing those lists, right? Cycling them in and out as needed to make sure that our exclusions are as efficient as possible. So it just very quickly made our ad budget go a lot farther.
Amazing. Yeah, we can kind of see that there where you've got highlighted 75,000 IPs excluded. Obviously, you haven't been manually hand excluding those. So I imagine you've definitely saved a lot of time here.
Yep, absolutely. It makes any paid media manager look really good, right? You can see very quick and efficient optimization right away.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so for any of you who want to understand a little bit more about Lunio, I'll give you a quick summary of what we're actually doing here. So we sit in between the ad platform and the clicks that take place. What we're doing is Lunio's algorithm is analyzing all the clicks that take place. We're looking at hundreds of different data points, IP locations, device ID, click frequency. Honestly, so many, too many to name right now. What we then do, or what Lunio does, not me personally, but we then categorize that into 3 different sections. So we've got legitimate traffic. This is exactly what you want to see. This is all the traffic that has a chance of converting on your website. We have suspicious, and then we have invalid. Invalid, this is what you don't want to see. This could be a bot, could be a data center, could be a competitor. There's so many different types of invalid traffic out there, and this is what we really want to help you reduce and get rid of. So once we identify something as invalid, what we'll then do is send that up for exclusion, and that way that person, that user, can't click on your adverts again. Now, with Google, for example, as we were looking at on Abraham's last slide, Google has an exclusion list that's only 500. There's only 500 IPs that you can block at any one time. So what Lunio is really doing as well is automating this all for you. We're allocating a threat score to each of the IPs that we'll visit. We can then cycle those into the exclusion list and out of the exclusion list based on different timings for how much of a problem they're going to cause. And this is meaning we're constantly on top of your data, we're constantly cycling through, and we're always making sure that the highest threat IPs or users to your account are being excluded, and you don't need to worry about that. So yeah, that's pretty much a quick summary of Lunio and what we're doing here. Now, Abraham, obviously you're protecting multiple platforms with us. We can see a spike here on your it's YouTube. So in September, we had a spike of invalid traffic. Can you talk us through what happened here, and how did Lunio help solve this problem for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our YouTube traffic was really steady and stable for a while. And then because I check Lunio almost daily, we saw a big spike, right? And immediately, something was wrong. So we dug into the Lunio IPs, and through our tracking, we're able to figure out really exactly where those campaigns were coming from that were driving the fraud or the invalid traffic. And then within those campaigns, what were the audiences? So we dug into our analytics tools, confirmed what we were seeing, put hard exclusions on those IPs, but then also started pushing towards a different audience, changed the way we were bidding to make sure we're bidding towards higher quality impressions. And, with Lunio's insights and the dashboards, we were able to really turn this around very fast, right? If we didn't have Lunio, we probably would still see these big spikes, and 30 to 40% of our traffic we were paying for would be a waste.
Amazing. I love that you're in your dashboard every day. It makes me so happy as your customer success manager.
I just wanted to follow up on the YouTube point. So, Abraham, firstly, since this happened in September, am I correct in saying there haven't been any further spikes like this, or have there been other little kind of peaks on YouTube specifically?
Yeah, nothing on YouTube this big, right? We've seen other little spikes on other platforms, but nothing this substantial, enough to be able to, again, kind of go through the same exercise of figuring out what's wrong, where do we need to pull traffic from, and things like that.
Yeah, and then just I suppose like a general question about how you find YouTube. Are you happy with the performance that you're getting through your campaigns you're running there?
I think
any insights you have about YouTube?
Yeah, no, I think YouTube's a great platform if you know how to use it, right? If you can set up your bidding correctly towards, like I mentioned, bidding towards high quality impressions, and you have strong placement exclusions, and you do the best practices of just making sure you're cutting out the wasted, and you're just finding strong users within the consideration part of the funnel.
Yeah, making sure you're not running ads on the kids YouTube for kids placements and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 1 sec, let me just change the slide here, and I'll pass back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Okay, great. So here we have, we've been looking at the Lunio dashboard so far. So let's have a look at your Google Ads account. Here we've got a couple of statistics here. We've spoken previously where you said that Lunio is sort of sitting in the top 3 or, top 3 tools that have helped your performance this year. So could you talk us through the metrics that you have here and, what influence Lunio has had on them?
Yeah, and like I mentioned a few times, right, Lunio just really helped cut out the traffic that we didn't even know we needed to cut out. So when you take that low quality traffic and you spend that money in other places, like I said, we're driving a higher quality user to our site. So we saw a 13% increase in conversion rate very quickly. And we all know if you see a 13% increase in conversion rate, you're going to see a big drop in cost per lead. So we saw about an 11% drop. And those types of numbers followed us all the way down the sales cycle. So while CPCs did rise, because when you bid on higher quality traffic, you're going to pay a little bit more. We just saw such substantial downstream impact, and we just didn't expect the big total ROAS impact that Lunio helped benefit for us.
Amazing. No, I really appreciate that, James. Yeah. It's amazing to hear. James, I'll hand back over to you.
Yeah, it's just it's super impressive the results you achieved, Abraham, and obviously Lunio was part of that story. It wasn't the whole story. Yeah. Is there anything else that you think throughout your activities and adjustments and strategies that you used in 2023 that were really contributing to the success that you achieved?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? I think Lunio was a part of it. I think the way that our team looks at paid media is we want the best of the best, right? We want the highest quality, the most contextually relevant. So Lunio kind of helps fit into that mission, I should say, with our paid media campaigns of how do we find the best keywords that are most focused, or the audiences where people are ready to buy now, right? And how do we really just push our spend towards that type of traffic? So yeah, like I said, our mission is just finding the best quality users that genuinely want to interact with us.
Yeah, and congrats on your 2023 performance. It's really impressive to see. So just to mention, for anyone watching that hasn't already got a copy of Lunio's 2024 wasted ad spend report, again, I sound like a broken record, but you can find that in the doc section. It contains a full breakdown of average IBT rates across channels like Google Search, Display, PMax, Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn, and lots more. We also looked at average IVT rate across industry verticals and geographic regions. That report was written in partnership with IAS and Scope 3. So there are additional chapters in there looking at maximizing the efficiency of programmatic ads. And then Scope 3 contributed a chapter on minimizing the often overlooked impact of paid media campaigns, their effect on the environment, essentially, and some of the carbon cost of the digital advertising ecosystem. So be sure to grab a copy of that report if you haven't done so already. So now, just going to move on to this slide, which is summarizing the results of an experiment conducted by an agency called Tune Social. So they switched LinkedIn ads, which had a high click-through rate, from website visit to impression-based bidding, which effectively reduced their client CPC by 55%. And again, the link to the full write-up of this kind of mini case study is available in the Documents tab if you want to check that out. But I'm just going to briefly kind of explain some of the key points here. So basically, their website visit campaigns that had a click-through rate of more than 1%, they noticed the CPM for those was 2 to 3 times higher than the suggested bidding range for the impression-based campaigns. So the team at Tune Social calculated that if they switch these campaigns to impression-based bidding while maintaining their click-through rate of above 1%, they would essentially be buying impressions for much less and would therefore have a much cheaper CPC. So with high click-through rates on your website visit campaigns on LinkedIn, you will generally get a much cheaper CPC as well as greater click volume if you use impression-based objectives. So in short, the higher your click-through rate is, above 1%, the better this tactic performs. If your click-through rate is hovering around 1% or slightly below 1%, probably this approach isn't the best option to go with, or you might need to pay very close attention to your numbers. But at Lunio, we've recently experimented with this, and we found it to be effective in reducing our advertising costs on LinkedIn. I think the campaigns that we tested it on, basically similar to what Tune Social found, we found that we were cutting our average CPC in half, basically, getting the same number of clicks and the same number of visits, which was great. But while we're on the topic of LinkedIn, Abraham, is there anything else that, because I know you're running campaigns on LinkedIn as well, is there any other best practices or advice or things that you would mention when it comes to spending efficiently on LinkedIn, which is notoriously a very expensive platform?
Yeah, it's very expensive. And I think what I learned through Lunio is that LinkedIn had a lot more invalid traffic than I expected. I think the brand perception around LinkedIn, because it's such a professional network, is that it's, all clean traffic versus like a Meta, where a lot of times the brand perception is that's just full of bots. But when we connected Lunio to both of those platforms, it was completely switched, right? LinkedIn had significantly more invalid traffic versus Meta, right? Meta had actually one of our strongest traffic from like a good to suspicious to invalid perspective. So I think Lunio helped us make a data-driven decision on how we invest and how much energy we put into cleaning up the LinkedIn traffic. So I think from a best practice or even just like a recommendation, dig into your analytics platforms, Lunio, to see the quality that's coming from LinkedIn and really work towards being willing to spend a little bit higher CPMs or CPCs for better quality traffic, specifically on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think you touched on it in your answer there that, we often have perceptions about how rife bot activity is on certain networks. And like you said, Meta has a bad reputation for this. And I think there is a general kind of assumption that, it's not as bad on LinkedIn. But as you said, and as is kind of documented in the Wasted Ad Spend report, it is very prevalent on LinkedIn. We certainly see a lot of it. And, personally as well, like I had the assumption that, okay, well, I thought there would be a lot more bot activity on TikTok, and I was expecting to see like a lot more invalid activity coming through TikTok, just based on my own subjective biases and my view of that particular platform. I don't use it myself, but you know, the data shows that it's your own subjective opinion about how bad a platform is just that. And until you actually have data to look at, and until you're looking at an analysis of your clicks through from that platform, you don't actually really know what's going on, because it's impossible to tell otherwise. Yeah. So that brings us on to one of the final things that we'll talk about today. So lastly, looking ahead to the rest of this year in 2024, obviously there are big changes on the horizon. And Abraham, when we spoke previously about PPC trends for 2024, you mentioned that you expected to see much more emphasis on broad match. Not that this is entirely new. You know, this is something that Google has been pushing for a few years now, but it's certainly coming more and more to the fore. So could you talk about why you're expecting to see more of this emphasis on broad match, and what marketers need to be mindful of in relation to broad match when it comes to making sure that they're efficient with their spend?
Yeah, I think, you know, the trends in the next year or 2 years are going to become more automated, right? Google's going to have kind of like their black box, and we don't always know what goes into that. So I even think beyond just broad match, I could see a situation where everything's running on PMax in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So if that's the case, then, and cookies become deprecated, as we know, it's going to become more important for advertisers to leverage their first-party data. It's going to come down to whoever has the best data is going to win in the auction. So as all of this, you know, these products trend more towards automated, broad PMax, the brands that are able to leverage their own first-party data are definitely going to win.
Yep, that's there's no way about that. And you touched on in your answer there. Obviously, one of the biggest stories in paid media this year is that Google are going to deprecate third-party cookies finally. It seems like they are serious about it this time. They are going to go away. They're not going to push back the deadline this time. It's second half of this year we're forecast for. So, Abraham, just what would be your advice to people in terms of the best ways to prepare for that upcoming change?
Yeah, I think there's two answers there, right? One, work with your Google team to make sure you're doing the best practices, right? Whether it's enhanced conversions or some other technology to make sure that you're collecting as much data as you can. But two, leverage as much first-party data as you can. If you're not collecting certain pieces into your CRM, try to expand what you're collecting so you can at some point feed that data back into Google or Meta, or, you know, every advertiser has some sort of conversions API now, right? Where you can start to push your own data. So just try to collect as much as you can.
Yep. It's wise advice. So that's it for the content. And with the time left, we will address a few questions. I think there's only one unanswered question within the Q&A tab. I'll get to that in just a second. But of course, if anything we've covered today has piqued your interest in relation to fake clicks or invalid traffic, you can sign up for a demo of Lunio via the QR code here, or direct via the landing page address listed there on the slide, and you will get a traffic audit as well to find out how much of your current paid traffic is invalid. So with that said, I'm just going to look at the question here. So we have a question from Daniel Roston, and that is, Abraham, when you are using Lunio and kind of protecting Lunio, did you notice a difference in invalid or fake activity between search campaigns and display?
Yeah, honestly, there wasn't a huge difference between search and display right out the gate. I think what you often see is like Google Display Network display specifically has higher fraud rates, higher invalid traffic rates, I should say. So just watch out for, like, look at your placements, make sure you're not running open network without any placement exclusions. However, I've seen a lot of campaigns on a programmatic network that are very clean. They really have maybe like 10 very specific placements they're serving on, and have really high CPMs with high quality traffic. So it all comes down to really where your ad's serving and what your audience is. Because you might see a situation where display is clean and search is horrible because you're running broad match on maximize conversion with one conversion signal, right? So Google's just going to go all over the place to try to find your traffic.
Yeah, that makes sense. And on the programmatic side, I know you have experience with IAS, right, Abraham, and
very little, yeah, but I have some experience.
Yeah. As I said, we partner with them on the wasted ad spend report, and certainly if you're kind of running programmatic campaigns, it's a no-brainer to eliminate fraudulent activity via those guys. I'm just going to quickly look. So Abraham, this is relating to exclusion audiences and some of the stuff that we touched on. So at DeVry, are you excluding current students from and applicants from your campaigns?
Yeah, so I mean, it really depends on the type of campaign, right? I think from like a purely prospecting campaign, we want to make sure that we have really strong swim lanes, and we're really trying to find people that are unaware of our brand versus a remarketing campaign where we want to bring in people that maybe have reached out to us but haven't fully enrolled, right? And so we want to give both of those campaigns enough swim lanes. And so yes, in some ways you do use exclusion lists, you do use suppression lists, but also the other piece is just making sure your remarketing list, if you're using customer match, has really strong match rates, and you have a really robust remarketing audience you're feeding in from GA4. So a little bit of a lot of things just to make sure those two types of campaigns can run and perform well.
Yeah. And Jasmine, probably a question for you just about placement exclusions in the Lunio UI. So could you just talk people through what people can see in relation to their placements on the Lunio UI?
Yeah, definitely. So you can't exclude placements via our dashboard at the moment, but what you can do is see each of the URLs of where they're being placed, the legitimate versus suspicious versus invalid traffic, and then you can take that and judge, am I getting more invalid traffic compared to legitimate, and how useful is that to me? And you can do that for keywords, campaigns, placements, locations, network types. You can see that level of visibility for all of those, and then take that data and use that for your exclusions within your Google Ads.
Nice, thank you, Jasmine. So I think we will leave it there. I'm just going to wrap up so we finish on time today, but a few other things to say before I close. So obviously, first of all, big thank you to you, Abraham, for joining us today. Lots of useful insights there. Before we go, Abraham, is there anything you'd like to mention or anywhere you'd like to direct people towards before we close?
Yeah. No, thank you, James and Jasmine and everyone who attended. I would say, definitely like work with Lunio. I can't really sell them enough. They've been a huge partner over the last year, just helping us with our invalid traffic, but giving us access to betas and just allowing to kind of grow with them has been really cool. So yeah, I can't recommend at least trying Lunio, maybe just the free trial or reaching out to Jasmine or something. But yeah, that'll be my only shout out for now.
Thank you very much, Abraham. Appreciate that. Likewise, if you have any questions for us, you can contact us directly via hello@lunio.ai, and we'll be happy to help. As I mentioned before, if you are interested in getting a demo of Lunio and a traffic audit to see how much of your current traffic is invalid, just use the QR code there or the landing page address. Lastly, big thanks to everyone here today for tuning in, either at the live event or on demand. And we hope to see you again at our next webinar, which will be at the end of February. Details still to be announced on that one, but it is going to be a good one. So be on the lookout for that. Take care, everyone, and all the best with your 2024 campaigns. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.